just great, slender and lightly tanned, toenails painted bright red. When she tried to squeeze her eyes shut, he slapped her just enough to get her full attention. "Stay with me, Elbrant." Something on her dresser caught his eye. Lipstick. "You know what? Put some of that on. And a nice perfume. You pick something out." Elbrant did as she was told. She knew she had no choice. He held his cock in one hand, the scalpel in the other. A visual she would never, ever forget. Then he forced himself inside her. "I want you to play along," he said. "Fake it if you have to. I'm sure you've done that before." She did her best, arching her pelvis, moaning once or twice, just not looking at him. "Now look at me," he commanded. "Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. That's better." Then it was over for him. For both of them. "A quick chat before I go," he said. "And believe it or not, I am planning to leave. I'm not going to hurt you. No more than I already have." He found her purse on the floor. Inside was what he was looking for. A driver's license and a black address book. He held the license under the bedside lamp. "So it's Lisa. Very nice picture for government issue. Of course, you're even prettier in real life. Now let me show you a few pictures of my own." He hadn't brought many, just 4 of them, but some of his personal favorites. He fanned them out in the palm of one hand. Lisa was back to frozen again. It was almost funny, like if she was still enough he might not notice her there. He held up the photos for her to see, one at a time. "These are all people I've met twice. You and I, of course, I've only met once. Whether or not we meet again is entirely up to you. Do you follow? Am I making myself clear?" "Yes." He stood up and walked around to her side of the bed, gave her a few seconds to process what he was saying. She covered herself with a sheet. "Do you understand me, Lisa? Truly? I know it can be a little hard to concentrate right now. I imagine it would be." "I won't say anything," she whispered. "I promise." "Good. I believe you," he said. "Just in case, though, I'm going to take this, too." He held up the address book, flipped it open to B. Here we go. Tom and Lois Brandt. Is that Mom and Dad? Vero Beach, Florida. Supposed to be very nice down there. The Treasure Coast. "Oh, God, please," she said. "Entirely up to you, Lisa," he said. "Of course, if you ask me, it would be a shame after all this for you to end up like those others in the photographs. You know, in parts, sewn up. Whatever I was in the mood to do." He lifted up the sheet and looked her over one more time. "They'd be pretty parts in your case, but parts all the same." And with those last words, he left Lisa Brandt alone with her memories of him.
Chapter 52. This is why I don't wear ties. John Sampson pulled at the constricting knot around his neck and ripped the damn thing off. He tossed it and what remained of his coffee into the trash. Immediately, he wished he hadn't thrown away the coffee. He and Billy had been up half the night with little Jacata and her flu. A truckload of caffeine was exactly what he needed right now. When the phone on his desk rang, he was in no mood to talk to anybody about anything. "Yeah, what?" A woman's voice came on the other end. "Is this Detective Sampson's line?" "Sampson here. What?" "This is Detective Angela Susan Anton. I'm with the Sex Assault Unit, assigned to the 2nd District." "Okay." He waited for her to connect some dots for him. I was hoping to pull you in on a disturbing case, Detective. We are running into some serious dead ends over here. Sampson fished in the wastebasket for the coffee container. All right. It had landed right side up. What's the case? A rape. Happened in Georgetown last night. The woman was treated at GUH, but all she'll say is that she was attacked. She won't ID the guy. Won't describe him at all. I was with her all morning and got nowhere. I've never seen anything quite like it, Detective. The level of fear the woman is exhibiting. Sampson crooked the phone to his ear and scribbled some notes on a tablet that said Dad Pad at the top, a Father's Day knick-knack from Billy. Okay so far, but I'm curious why you're calling me, Detective. He sipped the bad coffee again, and suddenly it seemed not so bad. Anton took a beat before answering. I understand that Alex Cross is a friend of yours. Sampson set down his pen and leaned back in his desk chair. Now I see. I was hoping you could— I hear you loud and clear, Detective Anton. You want me to pimp the deal for you? No, she said quickly. Rakeem Powell tells me you two are seriously good when you work serials together. I'd like to have you both in on this. Hey, I'm just being honest. Sampson stayed quiet, waiting to see if she'd get out of this one or hang herself some more. We left messages for Dr. Cross last night and this morning, but I have to imagine everyone and their uncle want a piece of his time, now that he's freelancing. Well, you're right about that. Everybody wants a piece of him, he said. But Alex is a big boy. He can take care of himself and make his own decisions. Why don't you keep trying his phone? Detective Sampson, this perp is a particularly sick bastard. I don't have the luxury of wasting anyone's time on this case, including my own. So if I've stepped on your toes in any way, maybe you can get the hell over it, cut through the bullshit, and tell me if you'll help me or not. Sampson recognized the tone, and it made him smile. Well, since you put it that way, yeah, okay. I can't make any commitments for Alex, but I'll see what I can do. Great, thank you. I'll send over the files now, unless you want to pick them up here. Hold on. Files? Plural? Am I going too fast for you, Detective Sampson? The whole reason I'm calling you is your and Dr. Cross's experience with serial cases. Sampson rubbed the telephone receiver against his temple. Yeah, I guess you are going too fast for me. Are we talking homicide here, too? Not serial murder, Anton said tightly. Serial rape. Chapter 53. This isn't a consult, I told Sampson. It's a favor, to you personally, John. Sampson raised his eyebrows knowingly. In other words, you promised Nana and the kids no more field work. I waved him off. No, I didn't promise anybody anything. Just drive and try not to hit anyone on the way. At least no one that we like. We were in McLean, Virginia, to interview Lisa Brandt, who had left her Georgetown apartment to go stay with a friend in the country. I had her case file on my lap, along with 3 others, women who had been raped, but wouldn't say anything to help the investigation and possibly stop the rapist. The serial rapist. This was my first chance to look the papers over, but it hadn't taken me long to agree with the originating detective's conclusion. These attacks were all committed by one man, and the perp was definitely a psycho. The known survivors were of a type: white women in their 20s or early 30s, single, living alone in the Georgetown area. Each of them was a successful professional of some kind, a lawyer, an account executive. Lisa Brandt was an architect. These were all smart, ambitious women, and not one of them was willing to say a word against or about the man who had attacked her. Our perp was clearly a discerning and self-controlled animal who knew how to put the fear of God into his victims and then make it stick. And not just once, but 4 times, or maybe more than 4, because chances were very good he had other victims, women too afraid to even report they'd been attacked. Here we are, Sampson said. This is where Lisa Brandt is hiding herself. Chapter 54. I looked up from the heap of detective files on my lap as we pulled in through a giant hedgerow onto a long crescent-shaped driveway paved with broken seashells. The house was a stately Greek revival with two-story white columns in front and looked like a suburban fortress. I could see why Lisa Brandt might come here for refuge and safety. Her friend, Nancy Goods, answered the door and then stepped outside the house to speak with us in private. She was a slight blonde and looked to be about Ms. Brandt's age, which the file put at 29. "I don't have to tell you that Lisa has been through hell," she said in a whisper that really wasn't necessary out here on the porch. "Can you please keep this interview as brief as possible? I wish you could just leave. I don't understand why she has to talk to more police. Can either of you explain that to me?" Lisa's friend clutched her elbows across her chest, obviously uncomfortable but also pushing herself to be a good advocate. Sampson and I respected that, but there were other considerations. "We'll be as brief as we possibly can," he said. "But this rapist is still out there. Don't you dare lay a guilt trip on her. Don't you dare." We followed Miss Goods inside through a marble-tiled foyer. A sweeping staircase to our right echoed the curve of the chandelier dangling overhead. When I heard the chatter of children's voices off to the left, they seemed somewhat incongruous with the formality of the house. I began to wonder where these people kept their messes. Miss Goods sighed, then showed us into a side parlor where Lisa Brandt sat alone. She was tiny but pretty, even now under these unfortunate circumstances. I had the sense that she was dressed for normality, in jeans and a striped Oxford shirt, but it was her bent-over posture and her eyes that told more of the story. She obviously didn't know if the pain she was feeling now would ever go away. Sampson and I introduced ourselves and were invited to sit down. Lisa even forced a polite smile before looking away again. "Those are beautiful," I said, pointing at a vase of fresh-cut rhododendron on the coffee table between us. It was easy enough to say because it was true, and I honestly didn't know where else to start. "Oh," she looked at them absently. "Nancy is amazing with all that. She's a real country girl now, a mom. She always wanted to be a mother." Sampson began gently. "Lisa, I want you to know how sorry we are that this happened to you. I know you've spoken with a lot of people already. We'll try not to repeat the background detail too much. Okay so far?" Lisa kept her eyes fixed on the corner of the room. "Yes, thank you." "Now, we understand you received the necessary prophylaxis, but preferred not to provide any physical evidence in your exam at the hospital. Also that you're choosing for the time being not to give any description of the man who committed the crime against you. Is that correct?" "Not now and not ever," she said. Her head shook slightly back and forth, like a tiny no, repeated over and over. "You're not under any obligation to talk," I assured her, "and we're not here to get any information that you don't want to give." "With all that in mind," Sampson went on, "we have some assumptions that we're working with. First, that your attacker was not someone you knew. And second, that he threatened you in some way to keep you from identifying him or talking about him. Lisa, are you comfortable telling us whether or not that's accurate?" She went very still. I tried to gauge her face and body language, but saw nothing. She didn't respond to Sampson's question, so I tried a different angle. "Is there anything you've thought about since you spoke with the detectives earlier? Anything you'd like to add?" "Even a small detail might aid in the investigation," Sampson said, "and catch this rapist." "I don't want any investigation of what happened to me," she blurted. "Isn't that my choice?" "I'm afraid it's not," Sampson said in the softest voice I'd ever heard out of him. "Why not?" It came out of Lisa more as a desperate plea than a question. I tried to choose my words carefully. "We're fairly certain that what happened to you wasn't an isolated incident, Lisa. There have been other women." At that, she came undone. A choking sob escaped her, letting loose everything behind it. Then Lisa Brandt doubled over onto her lap, sobbing with her hands clutched tightly over her mouth. "I'm sorry," she said in a moan. I can't do this. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Miss Goods rushed back into the room.